Okay, hi everyone. This is Sasha Hodder. We're on the HodlCast with Lyn Ulbricht today. Lyn, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm in Austin, Texas, which is really nice because it's kind of my old stomping grounds.
What are you up to in Austin?
Well, coming to be with family and friends in the holidays and doing some doctor stuff and catching up with some things.
Nice. Um, I think everyone probably knows who you are, but I was wondering if maybe you could just give a little background on yourself and maybe even go beyond, the more recent 5 years and tell us a little bit about, what you used to do.
In my previous identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my current identity is I'm Ross Ulbricht's mother, and Ross is the defendant in the Silk Road case who was given double life plus 40 years without parole for all nonviolent charges. He was a first-time offender. So I'm really been his advocate and working probably, just full time and more for 5 years now to defend him, to gain at this point, well, it's all been about gaining his freedom. And I just want to say right now that we have a petition just passed 109,000 signatures
Oh,
today.
nice. Another 9,000. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And I was watching it as it went by. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's getting. And and we're, just really trying to make the point to the president that this case is worthy of his consideration to commute Ross's sentence, because the sentence is so extremely excessive and sets such a dangerous precedent for what is already excessive sentencing in this country. Before that, I've been I was a freelance writer, and I also worked with my husband on our business, which it is actually, it's still our business. He built bamboo houses in the rainforest of Costa Rica, and we rent them out as vacation rentals. So I was helping him with that, and now he's just taken that over so I can devote full time to Ross's case and campaign. So yeah.
Nice.
So yeah.
Thank you. And how's Ross doing?
Well, he is having, it's a tough time right now because Ross put himself in protective custody 3 months ago because he refused to assault another inmate, and that made him a target for assault. And so he put himself in protective custody, which essentially is it's called the SHU, segregated housing unit, and essentially you are sitting in a metal box all day long every day. And it's a cell, but it's you can't see out, you can't, it's a metal box. And but he's still, despite this, when I've seen him, and I have to talk to him through a monitor with a receiver, he's still positive. He's still making good use of his time there, as best he can, and keeping a good attitude. Ross is quite amazing. He's very strong mentally and emotionally, and hopefully physically. He even does a workout in there, which isn't easy. He's very confined, but he's trying to stay healthy and is just looking to the next thing.
Are they like feeding him okay and stuff or?
Well, it's been on lockdown now for a couple of weeks, and when it's on lockdown, the people who cook the food are also locked down, and so it tends to get pretty sparse, like bologna sandwiches and not a lot of food. So
Mm.
I don't know how, I think it's pretty, it's not great right now,
Hmm.
but he'll survive. He's strong. He can do it. And Ross knows how to fast. He knows how to get through things like this. And so, but it's rough. He's in a rough, it's very challenging what he's going through right now. Well, the whole 5 years have been, but yeah.
Yeah. You recently put out the Railroaded series, and for me that was very enlightening. Like, I had heard so much about the case and some of the strange things that had gone on, but I thought that the Railroaded really outlined it all very well. How did you come up with that, or like how did you put it all together?
Yeah, well, we realized that I didn't know a lot of things. We realized that certainly the general public and didn't know lots of things because what you read in the media is about this deep. It's very shallow,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just and a lot of it's plain out false. So when I and a team started delving into the record, we realized, wow, this is quite the story about and it's all in the public record. None of this is something our opinion or that we think happened. This is all public. So there's almost 400 footnotes in this thing that you can click and follow where all this came from, all the sources. But it's just making it public and laying it out for journalists or anyone else who wants to dig in and really get the story to have it all right there. It was actually recommended to do that by a woman named Catherine Austin Fitts, who's a brilliant woman who she herself fought the federal government and won, but it took years and millions and a big chunk of her life to do it. And she did essentially the same thing, where she laid out her case and had citations, and it was very accessible. And so she said, listen, do that. And so that's kind of where the idea came from.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just kind of went with that, and it became kind of it's not really a narrative because it's not dramatized any more than it is in the actual record, but it kind of reads like it. It's because it's so amazing. It's kind of riveting. But then we decided to make an audio of it as well. And so we were so lucky that a supporter who's a professional narrator did it as a donation to us and narrated the whole thing. And he's great.
Yeah,
And
he was
yeah,
phenomenal to listen to. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And he's a lovely person. And then uh, we went ahead and made a little video to go with it, just really still pictures and quotes and things to kind of make it interesting to watch if you want to watch. But you can also just listen to it on SoundCloud or iTunes, but also just read it. It's up on our site. So any of those ways to make it accessible.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any idea how many views it's got, or from the podcast side of it? It's probably hard to
No.
collect it because it's on several different streams.
Yeah, I know YouTube, I think, had at least a couple thousand,
Nice.
but one episode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm terrible about stuff like this. I really need to keep track of this thing and stuff, but
Oh.
I'm I'm not a detailed person. I never people say how much this and how many
You've
this, and
got
I'm like,
some big
I don't know.
some big fish to
I
fry. You
don't.
don't need to worry about the
Yeah,
little,
I
thing.
need other people to help me with that.
So I think one of the things that documentary, or it's the series of the work you did, it really highlighted the corruption that went on behind the scene. Can you speak a little bit of that? Like, who was the first agent that was kind of investigating it during your hand? During
Yergin, yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, he was a Homeland Security guy out of Chicago, and it's a little murky how he got into it and how he came upon Silk Road. That's never really been revealed.
Yeah, it kind of said that I saw he captured 50 parcels at Chicago O'Hare Airport and found that they were really like individual amounts of marijuana, like for individual use, was packaged in a way that would make it undetectable. So that was kind of what tipped it. Then I think he started digging into it more of like, well, where is this going? And then
Hmm.
somehow got involved, got
I
it.
always wonder what the real story is, but anyway, maybe that is.
Mhm.
And so he became the lead investigator and actually ended up penetrating the Silk Road as undercover, um, and was spent 2 years and thousands of hours on the site interacting with whoever was Dread Pirate Roberts. And of course, he testified at trial that he thought lots of people were.
Mhm.
Um, and I heard him say it with my own ears. And so he was the main first guy. And then there were other this was a big case. It was being pushed by Senator Chuck Schumer, so it became high profile. It's a real good, it's a great trophy, which is what most prosecutors seem to be interested in, and as opposed to justice or truth. And different jurisdictions were competing over this case. And so Railroaded kind of spells out how these different guys, like in Maryland and New York and Chicago, were all fighting each other for control of this case. And it's pretty interesting to see how it all works.
Mm-hmm. And then
they had to find a trophy. They had to find that perpetrator. That was their goal. And they wanted to do it fast because Chuck Schumer was, beating the drum.
Mm-hmm. And then where did the other two, Force and Bridges, where did they come into play with it?
Well, they were at the core of the investigation in Maryland, and Force was a DEA agent, and Bridges was a Secret Service agent on assignment from the NSA, which is a whole other tie-in to this case, the NSA. But they had full access and unfettered access to the site through Curtis Green, who was a top-level admin who was arrested. And Curtis talks about this a lot in interviews as well as in his new book. But they gained a backdoor to the Silk Road. They were able to change passwords, keys, access bank accounts, change any chat, delete anything, and they could commandeer accounts. They had many aliases that they ran, and they could also commandeer DPR's account and act as DPR. So this was not allowed to be known to the jury. That's the key point about these guys. Yes, they were corrupt. Yes, they stole money. Yes, they were thrown in prison. They're in prison now. But that's just not allowed to be known to the jury. That's the real crime here. I believe that if the jury had known that two corrupt agents had full access to the evidence that they were being told was the truth, it might have cast some reasonable doubt there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then, so who was this Not Wonderful character too? That was one of the players in the.
Right. Well, Not Wonderful. That's because somebody else was Mr. Wonderful. Now I'm getting confused because these names. But Not Wonderful approached whoever was DPR at the time and offered to sell him information about the law enforcement investigation. And it seems like this is a third corrupt agent. That's the conjecture, that it's a third corrupt agent. And they actually did set up a deal where Not Wonderful would supply DPR with information and DPR would pay him. This went on the few months before Ross was arrested. But what's very interesting about it is that after trial, it was discovered that the conversations between Not Wonderful and DPR had been tampered with, and that big sections of them, the ones right prior to Ross's arrest, were deleted. So what the evidence showed was a deleted, tampered with version of those conversations. And the way it was discovered is another folder after trial, because they were buried in 6 terabytes of material. It was impossible to get it all done.
For context, like how big is 6 terabytes? Like
what I understand, it's kind of like the Library of Congress or maybe more. Yeah. I think it's like what is it? Several billion pages of single space typing. I mean, it's like it's crazy amount. And this apparently is a tactic of the government. They had the material for a year, and they wait to just dump it on the defense without enough time to go through it. This is our government. This is how they act. It's just really shocking. So anyway, it was discovered after trial that someone with high-level access, probably the same Not Wonderful, went in and deleted it, because a full copy, only up till August, but a fuller copy was discovered in a folder. Now, there's still a big bunch missing, which is very crucial because it's in the months before, I think it was August, so that would have been probably about a month and a half before Ross was arrested. And the payments were still coming in to Not Wonderful. So we know that the information was given, but it doesn't show the information. So we don't know what that information actually said. And I sure would like to, but it's not available. But it does prove that evidence was tampered with, and there's no way to know how much of it had been tampered with because it only shows the last login. So they could have tampered with all kinds of things, but it wouldn't show up. We wouldn't know. So, it begs the question, how much of this evidence is reliable at all? And the other thing is, it also was discovered at the same time that DPR had signed into his account, his Silk Road Forum account, after Ross was in solitary confinement for almost 7 weeks. So if Ross is DPR, who was that?
And so when he was sentenced, the jury had to believe that he was the only DPR. That was a big part of it. And this information that someone else logged in 7 weeks after he was put in solitary confinement, that was in the 6 terabytes of information, but it was available before the jury trial, but no one found it.
Correct.
And then who eventually found it?
People on the defense team continued to comb through it.
And then, so how did they even get onto Ross's trail with this? Like, I know they put a pen trap on his router. What do you think gave them probable cause for that?
Well, they never got probable cause, but officially, I don't know. There's a story that somehow miraculously an IRS agent did a Google search and found him. I'm like, really? Even though Yeryagan had been working for 2 years and all kinds of hackers, law enforcement, journalists, all kinds of people have been trying to discover DPR's identity. Suddenly this IRS agent just gets the brilliant idea to do a Google search. Okay. Yeah, right. So to me, that smacks of parallel construction and the NSA. We know the NSA was, we know now from revelations from Snowden that were revealed this past March by The Intercept that the NSA was targeting Bitcoin users a few months before Ross's arrest. Well, of course, that means Silk Road. I mean, that's pretty much the only place Bitcoin was even being used. And so who knows? But the other thing that came out in the evidence is that Mark Karpelis was being pursued by law enforcement and had a meeting with the Maryland people who were where the corruption was happening. And this came out in trial, by the way, and offered them, said, well, hey, I'll give you DPR's name if you'll back off me. This is the lawyer, his lawyer saying it. And we know that shortly later, Ross was arrested. Now, I don't know that Ross's name was the one he gave them. I just know what the facts of the, record. But so I actually don't know the answer, but those are some possibilities.
And then, so once they started tracking his modem, what happened after that? They found him at a library?
Okay, well, as far as the pen traps, they, according to this IRS agent, he supposedly found Ross's email address with the Google search. Through the email address, they were able to identify the IP address, which was being hosted by Comcast. So they subpoenaed Comcast and got Ross's home address. That way, then since they had his home address, and by the way, they had surveillance equipment outside his house, tracking him from room to room physically with no warrant and no probable cause. This is a total violation of the Fourth Amendment. In any case, and that means, they can be outside my house right now.
And that's so funny because there's a huge line of cases that show where the boundary on the Fourth Amendment is, and you're not allowed to use a heat scanner, like to see inside the walls. So the fact that they could track him in between rooms would be very parallel to using a heat scanner. They're allowed to fly over like they can't go up and look over top of your fence, but if they happen to be flying over and it's free airspace, they can look down in your backyard, but they can't go too low. Like there's certain cutoffs of how, like you have certain protections around your home. Like it's kind of like an igloo around it that they can't look in unless it's an open window. Or, the person leaves some room open for them, but they can't go beyond that. But it sounds like clearly they have here, and they probably are all the time now.
Yeah, well, probably are, because but in any case, they put a pen trap device on his router in his living room, and then from there they were able to get the MAC address, and that was able to identify his laptop and put it on his laptop. And at that point, it became similar to a tracking device, like a collar around an animal, where anytime you take your laptop anywhere in the world, you're tracked, your geographical location is tracked, and whatever you're doing on the internet is tracked, including all of your internet activity. And basically this case, and this was brought before the Supreme Court to rule on, and they declined. And this is basically that saying that any of us, any of our activity on the internet, anything we do is open season to the government to rummage around in, use against us, blackmail people with, or whatever else, throw them in jail without a warrant and without probable cause. This is shredding the Fourth Amendment and the intention of the law, the spirit of the law here. And so this affects a lot more people than just Ross and whatever. It's of concern, should be of concern to every American. And I say American because that's our Bill of Rights, but really it should be of concern to anyone.
I agree 100%. And then so when they arrested him at the library, the way it read and railroaded was that they just took his laptop and didn't follow any protocol on taking, like, it should have been this digital footprint so that it shows everything that was done on the laptop, but they didn't use the software properly.
Yeah, and I'm not techie enough to really explain it all. I do know that the guy who ended up with the laptop, he had the laptop for up to 3 hours with nobody, by himself, no witnesses, no oversight whatsoever, which is completely against protocol. Who knows what he did.
Yeah.
Sorry, that is not the chain of custody that's supposed to happen. And they crashed the computer. What ended up being the evidence from Ross's laptop was a copy of a copy of a copy. And within all of that, it's very easy to manipulate what's on there. It was none of it met the guidelines. I heard the guy with my own ears at trial say he violated and was not familiar with the guidelines for investigating a laptop. And this was admitted, no problem. Now, this is also of concern. This means that they can take my laptop and have it, and nobody knows what they're doing with it, and claim what's on there is what I put on there. I don't know if that, it's like, this is wrong. This leaves all of us open and vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're just supposed to believe it. We're just supposed to believe the government. We're supposed to just
know. In this case, we know something was tampered with because that conversation with Mr. or Not Wonderful was there, and then
that for sure. Yeah.
So if that was tampered with, it means the whole thing is probably all been tampered with.
Well, good assumption. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then he was denied bail. He was denied his Eighth Amendment right as well. And I think I saw in there people were pledging their house for his bail. Like he had hundreds of people coming forward trying to get him bail, and they refused.
Yep. we had family members who aren't wealthy. I mean, this is, my sister pledged her home. It's her main. I mean, if she lost her home, she would be in really bad shape. And she said, no, it's okay. I know Ross. I trust Ross. He's not going to run off on it. Yeah, here's my house. And savings. There, other sisters of mine put up their whole savings. Other friends put up a lot of money, and other family members. And it was a grassroots bail, effort. And the judge was like, no. And I don't even know, frankly, if he read the letters. We got 70 letters, which our lawyer said was unheard of in his career for bail. I have my doubts he even read them, because he was asking, oh, what did it say in the letters? I'm like, God, and then the prosecution gets up and springs on the defense. Oh yeah, there's these murder for hire. This is like the first time we heard about it. And he's up there pointing. They love pointing. They're really big on the drama. I think they all go to drama school or something. Pointing at this man, and I'm like, playing to the media. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? And the judge denied him bail. Now, bail is in the Constitution. It's not just like, oh, you don't get bail for stupid reasons. And these were unproven allegations that later they dropped. That same prosecutor, when he indicted Ross, he actually indicted him. Those murder for hire charges weren't in there, but that's what they used to say. He's violent. No violence. And this is how prosecutors operate. This is who is running our courts in our country. Ross is not unique. This is happening all the time. Prosecutorial abuse and violations constantly. These people take an oath when they take their office to uphold justice and truth. And it's been hijacked by people who do not care about that at all.
Mm-hmm. And then how did he end up, if he was arrested in San Francisco, how did he end up in the New York Southern District?
That is a good question, because Ross has nothing to do with New York. He's never lived there. He's never worked there. And he was arrested and living in San Francisco. But funny, the senator from New York, Chuck Schumer, is the one that came out after, about this case, made it a big deal, very high profile. Funny, Chuck Schumer's compadre, Preet Bharara, his collaborator essentially, and who was his special counsel for years, was the lead prosecutor. And funny, the judge who Chuck Schumer recommended for her position on the bench was the judge. Amazing. And Ross was brought back to New York for trial for no reason, just because the Southern District of New York wanted it. And I was told at the time, what they want, they get. They don't even, I've been told by lawyers, they don't even operate like every other district. They're like their own little potentate.
Mm-hmm. And so at the time of trial, nothing about Force or Bridges and their corruption was talked about, but was it known within the government?
Oh, well, the prosecutors knew very well about it. And they pushed and pressured the judge, or really made the point, argued it vociferously in a pretrial hearing, sealed off hearing, that they must not be met. Well, first of all, they hid Bridges' existence from her and from the defense. So they were only talking to her about Force. She didn't even know about Bridges till later. So they kept that information secret. Then the Force was addressed. And they said, well, no, we can't mention that at trial because it would impede our investigation. And so the defense said, well, okay, well, wait, go ahead with your investigation. And once you're done, then we'll have trial. But the judge wouldn't allow that. And they were totally lying because, well, Sarah Turner was lying because he said, oh,
and
no.
He was the prosecutor?
Yeah, because he said, oh, no, it's going to endanger the investigation. But it turned out, it was revealed later, that Force had already knew he was under investigation. He had been interviewed by law enforcement. He knew. And so that excuse was a lie.
And then how long after the Ross's trial was Force and Bridges, like publicly, did they have their trials? Or at least get
Um,
their,
I
get
think it
their
was a couple of months.
Yeah, so it all would have been right
Yeah.
there at the time. It was all
But
known.
and so the jury wasn't allowed to know these two corrupt agents had free run of the site and could change evidence, do all kinds of things.
Change
Um,
passwords, log in as DPR. They should have, if they had to make the decision that there was one DPR and that was Ross and he had to take the fall for it, had they known that these other two people could log in as DPR, that would have given them a lot of information.
that would have cast reasonable doubt in most normal, intelligent people's mind. Yeah, that's cast reasonable doubt, and that's all a
That
defendant needs.
plus the knowledge that someone logged in after Ross was in solitary confinement.
Correct. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
there was another thing that was the judge wouldn't allow at trial that was supposed to initially be allowed, which is one of the administrators of Silk Road testified, not in trial, but to the prosecutors, that he and DPR had a special password sort of thing, a handshake, a digital handshake, so he would know that was the same DPR he was talking to before, because everybody knew there were lots. And he said that the one time they'd established that, and the second time DPR didn't have any clue what he was talking about. And this was supposed to be allowed to be said to the jury, and then at the last minute, the prosecution fought this, and the judge allowed it not to be mentioned to the jury. And even that one little thing.
Yeah, that alone would have cleared up that there were multiple.
Yeah.
Or at least cast doubt on the fact that there was only one. Definitely. And that he was Ross. So
look, Curtis Green came out himself and said, I acted as DPR sometimes. Lots of people did. I'm like,
and the jury never heard that.
Oh no, he just said it the other day.
Oh.
Yeah, it's fairly recent. But it just, come on. It's like, one person is responsible from day one of Silk Road to the, and all of this. It's just, give me a break.
Mm-hmm. And then what was Andreas, what happened with him? He was put up to be an expert witness, Andreas Antonopoulos, and the judge declined having him testify. And he said afterwards that he would have debunked probably cast some doubt on that evidence they used from the laptop and how the Bitcoin transactions were working, or?
Yeah, he actually, I told the lawyers they should contact him because he's such an expert, and they did. And he was ready to get on an airplane to fly in to testify. And they said that he couldn't testify, that what our lawyer had submitted was inadequate about him, that he wasn't enough of an expert, and so he didn't get to testify. And it would have, because apparently, according to, and I'm not that expert on cryptocurrency technology, but according to Roger Ver and according to Andreas and other people, what the government's witness said shows they don't even know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're lying,
Goodness.
The jury didn't get to hear that. And they also didn't get to hear the technological witness, who was Stephen Bellovin from Columbia University, who would have cast doubt on, say, look, anonymous networks, you can't say who's talking at any time. And these are open source networks. This is like, you don't know who's in there and doing stuff. And he would have explained that, and the unreliability of timestamps and all of that stuff. There's a lot of question about the timestamps, and he wasn't permitted to testify either.
It's so frustrating.
Travesty.
And then what did the judge say about Ross's philosophical beliefs?
Oh, yeah. She said, well, we know you started the site for philosophical reasons. This is it. Well, first of all, at trial, his philosophy, basically libertarian, was not permitted to be mentioned at all to the jury, because it doesn't really fit with the kingpin image of a violent thug who only cares about money. Some guy who cares about freedom and voluntary interaction just doesn't quite fit that profile,
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very, very closely controlled narrative on the part of the prosecution, and the judge went along with it. And then at sentencing, she said, "We know you started the site for philosophical reasons. And I'm just not sure that's a philosophy you've left behind." Which basically is saying, well, if you've left it behind, maybe I wouldn't give you life. But because you have this dangerous philosophy of voluntary interaction and free markets, you need to be in a cage for the rest of your life because we just can't allow this. Now, this is a direct and blatant violation of the First Amendment. Judges aren't allowed to take political and philosophical matters into consideration in sentencing. This is outrageous. And she said it right there. It's in the transcript. Anybody who doesn't believe me, read it. It's right there.
Goodness. I don't even know what to say.
It's like
awful. And there's so much wrong that happened there. And so you would think, an appeal to the Second Circuit would bring all of this to light. What happened when you tried to, they just denied it outright?
Once again in New York. Yeah, they denied it. They kind of hedged. They were like, well, maybe we wouldn't have given that sentence, and maybe we wouldn't have. But she has the right to do it. It's in her discretion, which actually in the law it is. But there's a lot wrong with it, and certainly taking someone's philosophy for one is that.
Well, and
is wrong.
painting and, not allowing so much evidence to come in. She gets the final call on that too. So
yep.
A lot of power vested in one person.
Yeah. And they didn't seem to have a problem with the corrupt agents. They seemed to think, well, so that's fine.
This is commonplace for
guilty. I mean, yeah, it was, I don't know. I was pretty shocked by the appellate court too.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And then it was looking promising all year for the Supreme Court. You had 20. Well, actually, can you talk? There was a lot of people that helped with the Supreme Court petition, but also wrote letters to the judge and stuff like that about beyond the bail hearing. People wrote letters on Ross's behalf for the trial too. Is that correct?
For the sentencing.
Okay.
And 100 letters that are up on our site. And from people who actually know Ross, and we're basically begging the judge to give him the mandatory minimum of 20 years. I mean, it's not like some short little stint in the county jail. This is 20 years. This means that at the age of 50 something, he'd get out, not even been online for 20 years, and I think it's a pretty safe bet he's not going to create another Silk Road. Okay.
Yeah.
And it is anyway, but he would. Who knows in 20 years where we'll be. And
would he have been allowed at a different prison than the maximum security one?
Right. And then he would, if he did without a life sentence, he wouldn't be in this dangerous maximum security prison with violent gangs and dangerous people. Because under 30 years, you go to a medium, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then down from there. And of course, if Ross's security score would put him in a low. I mean, he has no violence, nothing. But because of the life sentence that this judge gave him, he's facing every day he's facing violence and potential, threat to his life, really. Every day. That's what he has to live.
So that would be the 20 years would have been the mandatory minimum. What if he hadn't got, how come his mandatory minimum was 20 years and the person that sold the most drugs on the website got 12 years?
10.
10?
Yeah, well, he pled. So I guess that's why. But he actually sold drugs. He admitted to actually selling drugs. Ross was never accused of actually selling drugs.
Mm-hmm. And then you had 20 amicus briefs supporting the petition to the Supreme Court. That's
for 5. We had 5 briefs, but 21 groups, organizations who grouped with under these briefs and joined them and said, we agree with this. And we, some of them wrote it and some of them joined it. And it was about the sentencing, and it was about the violation of the Sixth Amendment, which says that you have to be judged guilty of something by a jury, 12 people, not one judge deciding that an uncharged allegation is true. And what she did, this judge, Judge Ford, Forrest is that she took murder for hire and other uncharged things that the prosecution alleged but never proved, and used them to justify and bolster her life sentence. The appellate court even said that it drove the sentence. And this is unconstitutional, puts us all in peril to have rogue judges going around deciding what's true without a jury. The other point was the pen traps that we addressed earlier and the Fourth Amendment. And so these amicus briefs and the people that joined them were addressing those two very important issues.
Mm-hmm. And then
you can look at them on freeross.org. It's all posted up there.
Why did the Supreme Court decline hearing it, especially after Carpenter? It looked like it was, right on track with when they decided Carpenter that they needed a warrant to track a cell phone. I mean, a laptop so similar.
Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. It was a perfect opportunity. We thought they were going to, because I didn't reject Ross on the first round. He was the only case that didn't get rejected. And we thought, okay, they're going to group it with Carpenter. And then we're going to have a chance where they'll remand it back to the Second Circuit, which is never a guarantee by any means, but at least we have another bite of the apple.
It would be a different judge now too, right? Judge Forrest would.
Well, they would have gone to the appellate court, so that's not her. Mm-hmm. But if anything that went back to the district would have been her. Thankfully and luckily for justice in the world, Judge Forrest has left the bench. She is now in private practice where she can hopefully destroy fewer lives.
Mm-hmm. And so what now? I know there's the 2255 motion coming up in June. How's that progressing?
Well, we've talked about that. I mean, it's something that's kind of just starting to develop. They're very difficult to achieve. Thankfully, it won't be Judge Forrest deciding it. That's one big hurdle. But I mean, I can't imagine her giving us a break. But it's still difficult. But we just try for everything. You have to keep trying. And the other thing is, which is also difficult to achieve, is a communication from President Trump. I believe President Trump cares about criminal justice reform. He's pushed this First Step Act and looks like it's going to go up for a vote in the Senate. He has expressed interest in pardoning people and in fairness. So we are hopeful. And to that end, we have a petition. It just passed 109,000 today. And really urge people to please go to freeross.org. There's a big red banner. You can click and it'll take you right to change.org in the petition. And even if you don't agree with everything I've said or agree with Silk Road, look, I get it. But this sentence is very dangerous. It should not be in the United States. The United States should not have a double life plus 40 years sentence for a nonviolent first-time offender, period. When I was growing up, nonviolent people did not get life ever. And very few people did. Now that life sentences have quintupled, they're very free, fast and loose with these life sentences now, and they're destroying people's lives right and left.
Mm-hmm. And not just the person that has to go live out the rest of their life in jail, but their family too. Like, look what it's
children. Yes, it's a hideous thing that's going on.
And you've met some of them at the visiting hours.
I've gotten to know them well, and it's I hear their stories and it's outrageous. I mean, that could be a whole other show. We'll have to do that one. Mm-hmm. But it's anyone with a heart and even a mind, can look at this and go, wait, whoa. This is like out of control. This is wrong. And this is also dangerous because, there's a book called 3 Felonies a Day that talks about how we all commit felonies. We don't even know it. There's so many laws on the books. If they want to get you, they'll get you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's scary, and I think what you're doing is, it's so amazing, Lyn. Like, he's so lucky to have you as his mom, and I think you've brought a lot of awareness to not only Ross's case, but to all nonviolent drug offenders that there's just something really wrong with this system. So
good. Well, thanks, and I appreciate friends like you, Sasha, and your support, and advice and insight, and it's really been great. I mean, I'm so glad to have you and there to support us and help us with this. And as a lawyer, I'm sure you can see it's just like this is something that needs to change in our country.
Big time. So what's kind of next on your agenda? I know we're going to be in Miami at the North American Bitcoin Conference together. Is that the next conference you're going to?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Take a little time for Christmas holiday.
Yeah. Someone said, "Can I interview you on Christmas Eve?" And I'm like, you know what?
No.
I have to take a break, please.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's still lots to do, but yeah, no. But that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing you, and
And we'll get some time on the beach and
warm.
Yeah. Maybe this time next year Ross can come to the conference too. Wouldn't that be nice? That's why I just keep thinking it's been such a hard road with so many stopping blocks along the way. Something's gotta give. And let's just Trump, for whatever it's worth, he might be just the man to make it happen. So
Might.
All right, Lyn, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Are we off air?
I'm going to end it right now. Yeah, or I'm going to stop the recording. Okay. Stop.